Prince Wamba, this just arrived for you. Wamba's heart stopped. He grabbed the letter, his fingers trembling as he tore it open. Finally, a letter from Danso. But as he read the first line, a chill ran through his body. You gave me the best time of my life, Wamba. I've never felt the way you made me feel. But I've decided to finish my schooling elsewhere, and it's time for you to forget about me. The sun had barely risen above the tall trees surrounding the school courtyard, casting a faint glow over the brick walls. Wamba stood in the middle of the courtyard, his eyes fixed on the grand gates, hoping once more that today would be the day. It had been 2 long months since Danso's sudden departure, and not a single word had reached Wamba from him. Wamba had written countless letters, letters filled with love, worry, and desperate questions, but every day the silence grew heavier. He felt like a prisoner in his own mind, pacing the courtyard and school hallways over and over, replaying their last conversation in Nigeria. It haunted him, the fear in Danso's eyes when the messenger whispered something to him. What had been said? What had frightened Danso so much that he had left without a proper goodbye? Wamba shook his head, trying to clear the swarm of doubts. But no matter how hard he tried, the questions kept gnawing at him. Why hadn't Danso replied to any of his letters? What was he hiding? The days had blurred into weeks. The once thrilling prospect of returning to school in Sudan, where he hoped to reunite with Danso, had now turned into an endless wait. 3 weeks had passed since the new term started, and still there was no sign of Danso. Every time Wamba heard a commotion at the gates, his heart would leap with hope, only to sink with bitter disappointment when it wasn't Danso. His studies were suffering, his health even more so. The sleepless nights spent waiting, the hollow feeling in his chest, it was consuming him. Even his friends had started to notice his inattentiveness and long face. Wamba asked around, but no one, not even Danso's friends, seemed to know where Danso was. They only said that Danso had shut himself off, barely communicating with anyone. Namazi stood beside Wamba one afternoon, her face etched with worry as she too stared at the gates. "He'll come, Wamba," she said softly, but there was doubt in her voice. "Maybe he's just caught up in royal matters back home." Wamba sighed, his voice barely a whisper. "He hasn't even replied to my letters, Namazi. I don't understand. Why would he do this? Why won't he talk to me?" Namazi placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Whatever it is, you'll figure it out. Maybe he has his reasons." Wamba's heart clenched. "I just wish he'd tell me, so we could face it together, instead of shutting me out like this." But before Namazi could respond, a young boy rushed into the courtyard with a letter in hand. "Prince Wamba," he called out, his breath labored. "This just arrived for you." Wamba's heart stopped. He grabbed the letter, his fingers trembling as he tore it open. His pulse quickened. Finally, a letter from Danso. But as he read the first line, a chill ran through his body. "I have read your letters. I am sorry for not responding sooner." His hands shook uncontrollably as he continued to read. "You gave me the best time of my life, Wamba. I've never felt the way you made me feel. Thank you. But every good thing must come to an end. I've decided to finish my schooling elsewhere, and it's time for you to forget about me. Please move on. I will never forget you, but this is goodbye. I wish you all the best." Wamba's legs gave out and he collapsed to the ground, his heart shattering with every word. The courtyard spun around him as tears streamed down his face. Namazi rushed to his side, pulling him into her arms as his body shook with sobs. "He's gone," Wamba whispered, his voice barely audible through the tears. He's really gone. Namazi held him tightly, trying to soothe him. Shh, Wamba, it's going to be okay. But Wamba shook his head. No. I know him, Namazi. He doesn't want to leave me. Something's wrong. He's in trouble. That night, as the darkness of his dorm room closed in around him, Wamba paced the floor, his mind racing. He couldn't accept it. He wouldn't accept it. This wasn't how their story would end. Wamba grabbed a small bag and hastily packed his things. His heart raced as he thought of the letter again. There was something hidden in Danso's words, a desperation, a fear that Wamba couldn't ignore. He remembered the look in Danso's eyes that day in Nigeria, right after the messenger whispered in his ear. Something had happened, something serious. No, Wamba muttered to himself, I won't let him go like this. With determination burning in his chest, Wamba slipped out of the school, disappearing into the night. He was going to Ghana. He was going to find Danso, no matter what it took. Wamba arrived in Accra on a dull grey morning. The sun barely peeked through the clouds, casting long shadows over the bustling streets as life went on around him. But none of it mattered to Wamba. His only focus was finding Danso. His heart ached with each passing day, the unanswered questions tormenting him. The long journey from Sudan had been exhausting, but his resolve to confront Danso kept him going. He had come with just a single carriage and one trusted guard, both of them staying at a small, inconspicuous inn not far from the palace. It had been 2 days, and Wamba had not yet laid eyes on Danso. He knew he couldn't just walk up to the palace gates and demand to see him. That would only raise suspicions, and Wamba feared bringing trouble to Danso's doorstep. Each day, he blended into the crowd, disguising himself in ordinary clothes. His bright royal garb had been traded for simple robes, just another face in the bustling streets. Every morning, Wamba found his way to the palace gates, watching from a distance, hoping, praying for a glimpse of the boy who had stolen his heart. But days passed, and Danso remained hidden behind those towering walls. Wamba's frustration grew. He had seen King Coffee multiple times, riding in and out of the palace on his grand palanquin, his retinue trailing behind him like a storm cloud. Courtiers, servants, even visitors. So many people came and went, yet Danso had not shown his face once. Worry began to creep into Wamba's mind. Was Danso even there? Had he been locked away in a dungeon or something? Or maybe he was at that school he mentioned in his letters. One morning, as Wamba leaned against a stone pillar, feeling more hopeless than ever, his breath caught in his throat. A palanquin emerged from the palace gates, and there, sitting inside, was Danso. Wamba's heart thundered in his chest as the palanquin drew nearer. He stepped out of his hiding place, his eyes never leaving Danso's face. He had missed him so much. Those piercing gray eyes, that familiar presence that sent a wave of warmth through him. Danso looked different though. He was stiff, closed off, his eyes distant, as if the weight of the world was resting on his shoulders. Wamba's heart clenched, his throat tight with emotion. He couldn't just watch from afar. He had to do something. He had to reach him. Wamba followed the palanquin, waiting until it was out of sight of the palace, away from watchful eyes. Then, without thinking, Wamba rushed into the street, his legs moving before his mind could catch up. The palanquin came to an abrupt halt, the bearers shouting in alarm. Wamba sprinted to the side of the palanquin, his heart pounding in his chest as he came up to the open frame where Danso sat. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, Danso's expression softened. Shock, joy, and relief flickered across his face. But just as quickly, his features hardened. He turned cold, his walls slamming shut. Womba stood frozen, his hand resting on the edge of the palanquin frame, waiting for Danso to say something, anything. "Who is this boy?" a voice from inside asked. Womba's gaze shifted, noticing the man sitting next to Danso, looking at him with disinterest. Danso's jaw tightened, and without meeting Womba's eyes, he spoke. "Just a street kid begging for food." Womba's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces as Danso reached into a small storage compartment and tossed a handful of coins at him. They clinked onto the cobblestone, landing near Womba's feet. "Go buy yourself something to eat," Danso muttered, his voice cold and distant. Womba stood there, frozen in disbelief. He looked down at the coins, his heart breaking, the pain almost unbearable. As the palanquin began to move again, Womba's chest heaved with emotion. Danso didn't even look back. Womba's fingers clenched at his sides as he watched the palanquin disappear into the distance. He wanted to scream, to cry out, but the hurt was too deep. The boy he loved had just discarded him like a beggar in the street. But even now Womba knew this wasn't the real Danso. Something was wrong. The fear he had seen in Danso's eyes told him as much. Womba stood there, his heart heavy, determined. He wasn't leaving Ghana without answers. The night fell quietly over Accra, the stars hidden behind thick clouds, casting the palace in a foreboding darkness. Womba's heart raced as he stood in the shadows, his breath barely audible in the still night. The palace loomed before him, tall, majestic, and fortified like a fortress. Sneaking in was a nearly impossible task, but Womba had never been one to back down from a challenge. Not when Danso was on the line. He thought back to the private moments they had shared in Nigeria, the stolen kisses, the whispered secrets. Danso had told him everything about the palace, its many rooms, and where his private quarters were. Those memories guided Womba now as he crouched low, using the cover of night to slip past the guards. His childhood on the streets had taught him how to be invisible when needed, and tonight those skills served him well. After what felt like an eternity of sneaking through narrow corridors and dodging the palace guards, Womba finally found it, Danso's quarters. His heart pounded in his chest as he approached the window. The flicker of a lamp inside cast a faint glow, and Womba could see Danso sitting on his bed, lost in thought, his expression pained. Womba carefully pushed the window open, slipping inside with barely a sound. But as soon as his feet touched the floor, Danso whipped around, his eyes wide with fear. "Who?" Danso started, his hand reaching for something to defend himself. But then his eyes met Womba's, and his breath caught. "Womba?" For a moment, Danso looked both terrified and relieved, his heart clearly warring with itself. Womba could see the mixture of emotions play across his face: relief, joy, fear, and then something darker, resignation. "You shouldn't be here," Danso whispered urgently, his voice shaking. He rushed toward Womba, grabbing his arm and pulling him away from the window. "If my father finds you—" "I don't care," Womba whispered harshly, his emotions boiling over. "You can't just send me that letter and expect me to disappear, Danso. I know something's wrong. I saw it in your eyes the day that messenger came in Nigeria. You're scared, but I'm not leaving until you tell me everything." Danso's grip tightened, and Womba could feel his hands trembling. "You don't understand." Danso's voice was barely a whisper, and Womba saw the tears pooling in his eyes. "You have to leave. If my father finds out you're here, he'll—" "He'll what? Hurt me?" Womba said fiercely, and then his voice turned pleading. "Let me in, Danso, please. It's me." Danso backed away, his face twisting in pain. I thought staying away would keep you safe, but to be honest, Womba, I've been miserable without you." Womba's heart clenched. "Then why are you doing this? Why did you send that letter?" Danso collapsed onto the bed, his head in his hands. "Because I have no choice," he whispered. "My father, he knows about us. He sent that messenger in Nigeria to warn me. If I didn't come back immediately, he was going to hurt you." Wamba's blood ran cold as he listened. "He threatened me. That's why you left?" "Yes," Danso said bitterly. "And while I know your parents will not sit idly by and let anything happen to you, I'm still scared, Wamba. My father is unpredictable and vicious, especially when it comes to protecting his reputation. I've seen him do things, horrifying things, to people who get in his way. He has spies, Wamba, everywhere. He sent one to Nigeria when I didn't come home. The whole time we were being watched, and he's been watching me, controlling everything I do since I came back. He forced me to change schools, isolated me from everyone. He won't let me go anywhere without his eyes on me. I had to leave you, Wamba. I had to send you that letter. I can't risk him hurting you." Wamba's eyes filled with tears, but he refused to back down. "Danso, I don't care what your father thinks. I'm not afraid of him, and I'm not going anywhere. We can get through this together. I love you." Danso stood up, his face twisted with anguish. "And I love you too. But that's why I have to keep you safe." "You're not keeping me safe by pushing me away," Wamba said, stepping closer, his voice soft but firm. "You're hurting both of us." Danso's defenses crumbled as Wamba reached out and gently touched his face. The dam of emotions broke, and Danso fell into Wamba's arms, his sobs muffled against Wamba's chest. "I thought I could live without you, Wamba," Danso whispered through his tears. "It's impossible. I want to protect you, but it's killing me inside." Wamba held him tighter, his own tears falling silently. "You don't have to live without me. We'll find a way. We'll figure this out, Danso." For a long moment, they stood there, holding each other as the weight of their struggles settled between them. Wamba gently wiped the tears from Danso's cheeks, his thumb brushing against his trembling lips. Their eyes locked, and Wamba whispered, "I'm not leaving you." Danso's resolve shattered, and before he could stop himself, he leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that was filled with every unspoken word, every moment of longing from the past few months. It was soft, desperate, and full of the love they had both fought so hard to hold on to. As their kiss deepened, the walls Danso had built around himself began to fall away. He pulled Wamba closer, his heart pounding in his chest. It had been so long since he had felt this warmth, this sense of belonging. Danso's lips trembled against Wamba's, his heart hammering like a drum in his chest. It had been so long, too long, and the months of distance, fear and longing rushed back in a wave. He clung to Wamba as though letting go would mean losing him forever. Every touch, every breath they shared felt like a lifeline, a moment of respite from the chaos around them. Wamba kissed him deeper, his hands gently cupping Danso's face, holding him close. "I missed you," Wamba whispered between kisses, his voice raw with emotion. "I thought I'd lost you." Danso's hands shook as they gripped Wamba's arms, pulling him impossibly closer. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry for everything, for hurting you, for acting like I didn't know you earlier. The man with me would have reported back to my father." Their foreheads rested together, breathless, both of them trembling with the weight of everything unspoken between them. Wamba's thumb brushed gently along Danso's cheek, wiping away the last of his tears. "It's okay. I understand. You don't have to protect me like that," Wamba said softly. "We're stronger together. We'll face this together." Danso's eyes were filled with pain, but also a glimmer of hope. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way. "I don't want to lose you," he murmured, his voice so fragile it nearly broke. "Right. We'll meet later this evening," he said, trying to sound hopeful. "At the inn. It's safer there." Danso nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of love and worry. "I will meet you there. Be careful." "I will," Wamba promised, pressing one last kiss to Danso's lips before quietly slipping out of bed. He dressed quickly, his heart heavy with the knowledge that they couldn't stay like this forever. But as he climbed out the window and disappeared into the lingering darkness of the early morning, he couldn't shake the feeling that things were finally starting to look up, at least for now. Inside the room, Danso sat on the edge of the bed, watching as Wamba disappeared into the fading darkness of dawn. His heart ached, but it wasn't just the separation from Wamba. It was the weight of his father's presence that loomed over him like a storm cloud. Since returning from Nigeria, his father had treated him like something unwanted, a burden he had no choice but to bear. Their relationship had never been easy, but now it was worse. His father's disdain had turned colder, more vicious, ever since he found out Danso was into men. The looks of disgust, the cruel indifference, it was as if his father couldn't even stand the sight of him. Danso had spent his whole life fearing his father's disappointment, and now that fear had become an unbearable reality. As Danso lay back down, his mind raced. His father was willing to do anything to keep people from finding out about his love for Wamba. The danger was real, but so was his love for Wamba. His father's wrath was terrifying, but the thought of being with Wamba, even in secret, was the only thing keeping him from drowning in darkness. The evening air was thick with anticipation as Danso made his way through the winding streets of Accra, disguised in simple clothes, his heart pounding in his chest. He had managed to slip away from the palace under the guise of attending an important event, his father none the wiser. Every step he took toward the inn where Wamba was waiting for him filled him with a mix of excitement and fear. It had only been hours since their morning together, but Danso couldn't shake the longing to be near Wamba again. His palms were sweaty, his heart racing, but the thrill of seeing Wamba again overpowered everything else. He couldn't get enough of Wamba, and the thought of holding him, kissing him, feeling his warmth, it was all Danso could think about as he hurried down the street. The inn came into view, tucked away on a quiet street not too far from the palace, its flickering lamps throwing elongated shadows over the entrance. Danso's breath quickened as he approached, his mind already replaying the sweet promises they had whispered to each other that morning. But as he stepped through the door, his heart sank. The innkeeper, a brooding man, barely acknowledged Danso in his ordinary clothes. Danso scanned the small room, his eyes darting to the table where Wamba should have been waiting. But the space was empty, and his stomach twisted. Wamba wasn't there. Danso stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. Where was he? Wamba had promised they would meet here, and Wamba wasn't one to break promises. A creeping unease slid up Danso's spine as he took a seat, his eyes flicking toward the door every few seconds, hoping to see Wamba's familiar figure stepping through. Minutes turned into an hour, and still no sign of him. Panic began to take root in Danso's chest, tightening like a vice around his heart. Where could he be? Unable to sit still any longer, Danso shot to his feet, pacing the small space, his mind spiraling with dark possibilities. His heart pounded as dread settled deeper. Could Wamba have forgotten? Or worse, could something have gone wrong? Desperate for answers, Danso approached the innkeeper, his voice tense. "Let me into his room," he pleaded, hoping that maybe Wamba had fallen asleep and missed their rendezvous. The innkeeper, who seemed to have little patience for Danso's urgency, shook his head. "Against policy," he muttered gruffly. But when Danso produced a handful of coins, the man's demeanor shifted. He eyed the coins greedily, then pocketed them with a curt nod. "Follow me." Danso's heart raced as the innkeeper led him up a narrow staircase to Wamba's room. He clung to the hope that he would find Wamba there, peacefully asleep. But when the door creaked open, the room was empty. His stomach dropped. A moment of relief washed over Danso as Wamba's personal guard stepped into the room. But that relief was short-lived. "I've been looking for him too," the guard said, his voice heavy with concern. "I haven't seen Wamba since last night, when he mentioned he was going to meet you. I thought he was with you." That was when fear truly took root in Danso's heart. His pulse quickened, panic clawing its way into his chest. "Where are you, Wamba?" Danso whispered under his breath, his voice trembling. His thoughts raced back to his father. Could King Coffee have found out about their meeting? Had one of his father's men taken Wamba? The terrifying possibility sent a cold chill down Danso's spine, freezing him to the core. Without thinking, Danso bolted from the inn, desperation fueling his every step. His feet moved faster than his thoughts, his heart pounding in his ears. He had to find Wamba. He couldn't lose him. Not like this. Not again. His legs burned as he sprinted toward the palace, the towering walls looming closer with each frantic step. It had to be his father. The thought crashed over him like a wave. King Coffee. He'd taken Wamba. Fear clawed at Danso's chest, nearly crippling him, but he forced his legs to keep moving, pushing through the terror. Please, 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 don't let anything happen to him. The silent prayer repeated in his mind as he ran, his breath ragged, his heart clinging to hope.